For Marcus, the threefold and twofold models are a foil for identifying the essence of the self with a unitary notion, which is the third model, the hegemonicon or intellect as such. Now we get a very extraordinary passage, I think. That is number 8. Quite difficult to translate. I think that's more or less right. You're composed, and you see the threefold model, but you see how he goes. You're composed of three things: mere body, mere breath, and intellect. 2 of these are yours to the extent of your needing to take care of them. But the third alone is strictly yours. This again is very like Plotinus. So if you separate from yourself, that is from your mind, everything other people say or do, or whatever you yourself have said or done, and whatever in the future troubles you, if you do all that, all that accrues to you involuntarily, the Greek there is aprohyrata, from your bodily envelope or associated life breath, and everything the external flux whirls around, very long sentence, so that your reflective mind, freed from its fated accompaniments, sun, he, marmina, lives purified and released by itself. We haven't lost ourselves, we've sort of removed the body, we've removed the external environment. If you do all that, living purified and released by itself, doing what's right, accepting what occurs and speaking the truth. Now, picking it all up, if, I say, you separate from this ruling part, hegemonicon, your emotional attachments, prospatheia, and the events of the past or the future, and practice living only the life you are living, that is the present, you will be able to live out the rest till your death, untroubled and kindly and in harmony with your own divinity. Well, that's a heck of a lot to take in. Let's take a breath ourselves. Many difficult ideas clamour for comment here. These ideas include detachment not simply from one's bodily frame and metabolism, but detachment from one's entire social media, one's past acts and words, one's concerns about the future. And here we get into something extraordinarily original. In short, Marcus recommends himself to focus wholly on the present moment, stressing, as he frequently does, that the present is all that one ever has. Very well, we may say. But what could such a self be, detached from memory and anticipation? Think of you. The desirable outcome, what Marcus proposes, is doing what's right, welcoming all that occurs and speaking the truth. Yes, but could anyone practice that regimen in complete detachment from their spatio-temporal context? How can persons be anything at all in abstraction from their history? Supposing that to be possible, would it not be an abandonment of oneself? Marcus's exhortation to sever his governing part from all the rest of him reads like a policy of self-cancelling. Well, tempting though it is to find this by no means unique passage too highly rhetorical to be fully coherent, let's try to probe into it more deeply. What I take Marcus most basically to be recommending to himself, though much filled out, is expressed by Epictetus in what Epictetus calls the divine law, and then spells out as guarding one's own, using only what one's given, not getting emotionally involved. Epictetus uses the word prospaske, just as we had here above somewhere, prospatheia. Not getting emotionally involved in anything else, whether companions, places, or even one's own body. Expressed in this way, Marcus's regimen is the standard Stoic doctrine that the key to genuine self-realization for ourselves as rational minds is not the world's impingement on us, but our outlook on the world. How one thinks about everything, or all is thinking, as he characterizes his I think you could say his essential philosophy of life in the little tag pan-hypolepsis, pan-esti hypolepsis. Everything is supposable, supposition. However, this version of his regimen makes it tractable, I think, at the cost of deflating its distinctness. Marcus's model of the self requires his own language, seems to me, hyperbolical though it is in that long passage, in order for its strangeness and its interest to be appreciated. His recommended detachment from time, space, associates, even his own history, highlights the self as an autonomous subject of consciousness, a fixed internal point of refuge in an outer context of flux and confusion. With an intensely personal, almost desperate plea, he seeks to give himself a renewed future, this is how I've interpreted it, a purification, as it were, a shedding of the past, merging his subjective consciousness with the ideal rationality that he calls his own divinity, daimon. And we'll have a bit more to say about daimon in a moment. Well, before turning to that concept, let's note that Marcus's recommended detachment is not confined to his body and his external situation. It may also extend to the basic faculties of the hegemonicon, as emerges most starkly in the passages I've put under 9. Erase your impression, fantasia. Stop your impulse, forma. I mean, these are basic faculties of the Stoic intellect, and the way the Stoics analysed the rational soul is a fantasia, it's forma, it's a basic faculties. Quench your desire, orexis. Restrict the governing part to its own power. And then, a bit more from another passage, erase your impressions by continually telling yourself, it's up to me to have no faultiness in my soul, no longing or any disturbance at all, but focusing on what everything is really like, I treat everything according to its worth. Be mindful of your having this power, thanks to nature. Well, what Marcus, following standard Stoic terminology, calls impression, impulse, and desire, as I said, are basic faculties of the mind, or governing part. Impression, fantasia, covers all thought contents, whether mediated by the senses or emerging into consciousness through memory, imagination, or abstract reasoning. Impulse and desire are the mind's motivating faculties and range over emotion, wanting, avoiding, the like. Epictetus, as we saw in that passage I started this discussion with, in passage 2 in the handout, identifies the good life with making correct use of one's impressions and motivating oneself accordingly. That's a Stoic formula for the rational life that human beings are divinely qualified to lead. Marcus entirely agrees with that regime, but in his therapeutic exercises he tells himself, as we see here, to contract into a mental space that for the moment excludes all thought and desire. We may best perhaps understand this contraction as a recommendation to concentrate as intensely as possible on the mind's identity as a faculty of judgment, untrammeled by this or that particular impression or impulse. Now, in normal consciousness, of course, a mind will always have some impression as its thought content, some inclination or aversion arising from its impressions. And Marcus says exactly that. He says your mind will be just like the sequence of your impressions. But to the introspective emperor, this experience always carries the risk of acting precipitately, assenting to impressions without carefully reviewing them, and reacting like a puppet that's jerked about by the strings of its manipulator. There's a very nice article by Berryman on this topic. I put that in the references, called The Puppet and the Sage, a very recent article in Oxford Studies in Ancient Philosophy. In telling himself to suspend normal mental processes, Marcus seeks to direct his focus exclusively on his capacity for rational reflection, or what he likes to call this word daimon, the soul's internal divinity, which is an offshoot of the divinely governed cosmos. So now I come to talk about that in a bit more depth. This notion of the internal divinity. Not because like the least original to the Stoics. I think it's It is conceivable, of course, that reflection on the Socratic daimonion may be behind it, but we find it most powerfully, I think, in the earliest full references in the Timaeus, towards the end of the Timaeus, when Plato is developing his three parts of the soul and talks about the intellect as a daimon. By abstracting from his body and surroundings, focusing only on the present, Marcus assures himself that he'll be able to live in harmony with his own divinity. What does this notion contribute to the emperor's understanding of the self in general and his own self in particular? So a little bit of background. The idea that human beings contain divinity in virtue of having a rational mind is common to Plato, Aristotle, and Stoicism. Daimon is a term that can signify either divine power at its highest level or something lesser, a demigod or spirit, and it can also, of course, refer to a person's lot or individual fate, as in eudaimonia, kakodaimonia. Hence, eudaimonia, conventionally translated happiness, is literally a divinely favoured condition or a good dispensation. Now, in archaic Greece, rationality was not a divine attribute, of course, but Zeus, the supreme god, was always taken to have a far-seeing and world-governing intellect, nous. As the philosophers developed their ideas concerning reason, divinity lost its physical resemblance to humanity, but acquired superhuman rationality instead. In this way, power over nature, goodness, perfect reason, and divinity came to be regarded as mutually entailing concepts. It's thus not too difficult to see why philosophers, starting with Plato, refer to the best human life as likeness to God.